Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to day 3 here at Expand North Star, our landmark startup event in association with GITEX Global, the largest tech show in the world. We are here deep into the very exciting program. This is day 3 here at Expand North Star, and we've heard from some of the world's most leading, innovative leaders when it comes to the tech world. I hope you've had a chance to enjoy all the networking opportunities. This is a place to, of course, collaborate on a business level, but also to collaborate and ensure that we make friendships here as well. As my colleagues behind me set the scene for a wonderful special session that we've got. Just to give you an insight, Expand North Star in association with GITEX Global, the largest tech show in the world. This is the first year we're here at our brand new venue at the Dubai Harbour. So we're very excited to have you all here for an action-packed week of programming and thought leaders. This special session, and the scene is set behind me, we are very privileged to invite leaders in tech and innovation from across the world. My name's Amandeep, ex-BBC presenter, based here in the UAE for the last 10 years. And just to give you a very quick insight, over the last decade, working here in collaboration with the inspiring Emirati talent, I can see that the secret to the success of the UAE, and in particular this city, Dubai, becoming one of the world's leading tech hubs, is exactly that global environment that's been encouraged. And to keep that theme up of inviting not only on this stage, but behind closed doors, that collaboration with business leaders from around the world, we are very privileged. On that note, this very special session is looking at leaders of change through the AI lens. The first gentleman I will introduce on stage, he's spoken on all the biggest world stages, and the gentleman in mind, he's also been now announced just very recently on the Time magazine list of the 100 most influential people in AI. His Excellency Omar Sultan Olama, Chairman of Dubai Chamber of Digital Economy, Minister of State for Digital Economy, Artificial Intelligence and Remote Work Applications. Please do give him a very warm welcome as we welcome him on stage to be part of this session. Your Excellency, welcome and thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. That's going to be your seat for this fantastic panel. Allow me now to introduce the rest of our guests as well. As I said, international world tech leaders. Mohamed Gouled, who is a Vice President of Industries at the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank Group. Please give him a very warm welcome. Emad, Mostaque, the co-founder and CEO of Stability AI from the UK. Please do join us on stage. And I hand over now to the expert hands of David Rowan, founding editor-in-chief, Wired UK, and also a leading light in the AI investigation. He's going to be expertly moderating this session for us. Please, ladies and gentlemen, give everybody a very warm of applause.
Hello
Thank
again.
you very much.
Good morning, Expand North Star. There are a few more pressing questions about how we use the opportunity of emergent artificial intelligence to boost productivity, to rethink healthcare, to create the new materials that solve climate change. But there are risks about unconstrained growth of AI. There are questions about bias in the algorithms. We're very fortunate in this session to have some super well-placed people to talk about this. And I'm going to start with His Excellency Omar Sultan Olama, who I met 5 years ago when I was writing a book about genuine innovation. I was traveling the world searching for case studies of successful organizations that were moving forward in a creative direction, and the UAE became a case study. And Your Excellency, I don't know if you remember, a few months earlier you had got married via a beam telepresence robot. You were already showing you were living in the future. And you were given this job, which was, as far as I could tell, the first government minister anywhere to have a particular remit to deal with artificial intelligence. And at the time, your mission, as you described it, was to enhance government processes, government services, by being the best place for startups and smart people to come and experiment, to be the world's most prepared country for artificial intelligence. 5 years later, this looks like the smartest ever job creation decision by any government, because you were early. AI has come to dominate everything, not just in government, in the private sector, but in every aspect of our lives. Tell us how your role has evolved, Minister, over the last 5 years, because you have a job at the heart of the future.
Well, thank you very much. First, I think if someone has discovered the fountain of youth, it's probably the gentleman on my left. He doesn't look like he's aged a day in 5 years. So you need to tell me what your secret is. And yes, I remember that conversation. In all honesty, the decision to appoint a minister for artificial intelligence seemed like a luxury at one point of time when I was first appointed. Today, most people believe that it's a necessity. And it is because governments are used to being reactive when it comes to technology governance, when it comes to actually trying to leverage on the changes that we're witnessing as a humanity. The UAE government believes that we need to be proactive. The conversation has evolved. I remember in 2017, the conversation used to be about self-driving cars and the trolley problem. What would the self-driving car needs to do in terms of two very different decisions. Today, the conversation is about LLMs. I think what needs to happen is we need to constantly ensure that governments are actually at the cutting edge, which is very difficult. We need to constantly try to eradicate ignorance within the government. What we've done over the past 5 years, and I'll quickly touch upon that. I can't condense 5 years in a minute, but the first question that I got, that I actually shared with everyone that I met, was what is the one thing I need to address as a government official working on this file? And I asked the best and the brightest minds, and they said you need to combat ignorance within the decision-making process. And we launched a program with the University of Oxford to teach officials within the UAE government to actually understand how to govern AI, how to audit these systems, what is good and bad use cases. We have nearly 400 officials today that are the AI army in the UAE that actually deploy, work, and ensure that the AI future in the UAE is a positive one. We've done a lot of programs to empower the public. So over 185,000 people in the UAE have been able to leverage the tools that we launched in the country to understand what AI is, to learn how to code, to actually interact with the technology. And I think that will make our population the most ready population in the world in the era of artificial intelligence.
I know part of your role was to educate people inside government and to find ways for every government department to track data that could make their department much more responsive, much more efficient. But things have moved forward very quickly, and now it seems a lot of the action is in the private sector. So how do you see a government's ability to compete with the accelerated progress of private companies such as OpenAI?
I can think of very few industries where the government is ahead of the private sector. Running prisons is one. Building roads and infrastructure is the second. Probably education in certain countries. The private sector, by virtue, is always far ahead, is always faster, more innovative, more efficient. And I think this is not going to change in the era of artificial intelligence. In the era of artificial intelligence, what government needs to do, and I think there's a model here for how the government needs to work. I think the government needs to endorse the direction. The private sector needs to actually be the one that is moving forward. And we have civil society auditing the progress and giving us feedback. If we do that, we'll ensure that the progress that's made in artificial intelligence is a positive progress.
Now, one of the concerns that's hitting governments around the world is how should they regulate AI if self-learning systems are moving super fast, if we could soon have AIs that decide what their next idea is, where does that leave the human? And there's some debate about whether and to what extent governments can constrain the AI. What do you think the role is of government in regulation?
Excellent question. I would say, so, whoever tells you that we need to regulate AI and just ends the conversation there, I think is missing the point. Because you can't regulate AI because AI is not a technology. AI is a field of science. AI is an ability that algorithms have to learn or the ability of machines or technology to learn. Now, what we need to be talking about is governing specific use cases of AI. Someone who tells you we need to govern AI is as if they're telling you we need to govern electricity. You can't govern electricity. You can govern the use. You can govern, you can safeguard people against certain negative things. So the circuit breaker was invented to prevent, for example, fires from starting in certain households and killing people, right? What we need to talk about in terms of AI governance is what specifically we need to govern. What do we need to govern from or towards? So the priority in my perspective today is we need to govern against misinformation. Like that is a key priority. We need to govern against autonomous weapon systems. We need to govern against deepfakes in ways where it can be used to erode trust. Now, that is the conversation that we need to be having. When we talk about a very broad and open-ended statement of we need to govern AI, what ends up happening is we focus on everything and nothing. The other point of view is the challenges of AI are going to differ depending on the geography. The challenges from these systems in the US are going to be very different to a country like the UAE. They're going to be very different to a country like Japan or China or England or others. What needs to happen is we need to agree on what the baseline needs to be on governing the technology that can go rampant and harm people across geographies, where that is possible and how it is possible.
The influence of deepfakes is already being seen in politics. I think only last week in the Slovakian election, there was a leaked voice recording of the liberal progressive Slovakia party telling a journalist how they're going to manipulate the election, and it turned out not to be a genuine voice. It turned out to be a simulated voice, but it's very hard to stop that. But before we talk about the concerns and the risks and the worries, let's talk about the opportunities. Let's talk about how AI can boost productivity, can boost economic growth. So Mohamed Gouled from IFC, International Finance Corporation, is in a very good position to see this opportunity. He's traveling all the time. Last year, his organization invested $43 billion, particularly in growth companies using tech. Now, IFC is owned by 186 countries, so I can't find anybody in the world who has a more global view. Mohamed, why should we get excited about AI's potential to make us economically more comfortable, to solve some real problems?
No, thank you very much. And it's I'm absolutely delighted to be here today, especially in the presence of this very esteemed panel. What I would say is we are trying to solve intertwined problems. And especially when you think about the constituency where we try and bring development. These are emerging and developing markets and countries, but more importantly also low-income countries. What we have seen as a model of global development for the past 100 years is a model where there has been a gap, and that gap manifests itself when you look at health, when you look at food security, when you look at education. And our ambition, and especially when we look to AI, is to see how can we deploy this tool, this technology, this science, to bridge that gap. A good analogy that I use is we've seen what mobile telephony has done. It has leapfrogged many sectors in the economies in low-income and developing countries, be it financial inclusion, be it health, be it education, but this really takes it to the next level. And that is how we think about it. That's where we see the value, and that's where we hope to see this technology challenge some of these problems that we are trying to solve.
And you are putting your money where your mouth is. You are investing in companies like Kera in West Africa using AI to improve health, supporting small businesses, companies like Builder AI, emission-free steel manufacturing using AI, a company called Boston Metal. And you talk about giving local economies the opportunity to leapfrog, to jump ahead using these new technologies. But isn't there a risk that if it cost millions of dollars, maybe billions, to develop the AI systems, the large language models, the smaller countries are going to be excluded? How do we ensure there's equity in the availability of access?
No, thank you, and a very good question. And I was actually talking to Emad before we came on stage, precisely around this question. How do you make sure that smaller countries, the less developed countries or emerging markets, do not fall behind, and this does not become yet again a divider, but rather something that closes gaps? And I think one important element here is how do you create country modules where they own the data, where you are providing that what they need to be able to build on, and where you are also dealing with the problems of languages and cultures that go with it when it comes to AI. But more importantly, what I would add is we, as IFC and part of the World Bank Group, have the convening power to make sure that we are pushing for investments, leading with our own investments and deploying our own capital risk to show everybody that there are opportunities across the board. And in fact, you may have more opportunities in countries where the gaps are larger than where the gaps are smaller.
So let's talk to Emad. Emad Mostaque, one of the 43 unicorn founders in the show today. Stability AI, a super ambitious UK-based company, creating new tools, but also thinking big. You're talking often about amplifying human intelligence. You're talking about AI as infrastructure. Where do you see, Emad, the big opportunity in AI promoting growth, promoting productivity in the foreseeable future, in the next 4 or 5 years?
Thank you. Yeah, my thanks to the organizers for having me here in such an august panel. I think one of the things His Excellency talks about, yeah, I remember you kind of a bit earlier heard, it changes when you become a minister. You become responsible for your people as opposed to responsible for your company or bottom line. Many governments look at things in terms of maintaining the status quo, protect their people. But here in the UAE, it's always been about not the status quo, but growth. It's a bigger pie for everyone as we use these technologies. These technologies allow us to scale expertise, and the best way I've thought about realizing the new type of AI, it's like a really talented, eager graduate. Your ChatGPT can write your things, our model, Stable Diffusion for image, and next we release video, audio, 3D. Again, it's like a very talented graduate, because a lot of the issue of emerging and developing nations is the brain drain, the expertise drain, the expertise access. But now everyone can have access to a language model that, for example, you can build on the wonderful work the UAE has done with Falcon as open source and customize it to your own language to represent your culture. Hello? Have the expertise required to do capital formation, to build new businesses, to improve education so everyone has a one-on-one AI tutor, everyone has a one-on-one physician. That was never available to billions of people. We always forget that a third of the world still doesn't have internet access. So for me, biggest potential, Mohamed, is the ROI, the return on investment from raising the floor for everyone. And I think that having an open and positive sum mentality to this is the way to do that.
But as a private sector founder, do you want regulation? Is regulation not going to slow you down?
I think regulation is entirely appropriate because this is immensely powerful technology. But you know when you go on an unknown journey and you don't know where you're going, at that point you minimize for your regret. You think about all the bad things that can happen. But when you have a target and a journey and a vision of the future, which is understanding how this technology can uplift and change the world, then you can have appropriate technology, just as His Excellency said. You look at things that can cause real harm, you mitigate those. You work on things like deepfake detection, others, because you know this technology is here, and we work on it together. Just with a few private companies being tasked with all this. But again, communally, we can really mitigate the bad while enhancing the good.
Your Excellency, your day job is dealing with some of the most powerful tech tools in the world, and every other nation is waking up to a sense of responsibility, to the need for an ethical framework. Do you think we can create an international consensus when so many of these models are open source and they're in the hands of non-state actors? If there's one request you have for everybody here when they go back home to start pushing into conversation, what would it be?
I don't think
It's working, it's working.
I think, yes, the IFC has the best mic in the room. So, look, I don't think we can afford not to, hello? I don't think we can afford not to have this conversation, not to get it right. The question is, do we have to wait like what happened with climate change? The IPCC conversation started in the 1980s, and we actually got the consensus in the 2000s. 20 years' time is what it took for us to agree on the 1.5 degree limit and all the frameworks that need to be put in place. Can we afford to wait 20 years? Absolutely not. And just so you guys understand how important it is for us to get it right, there are certain events that reshaped the world as we know it and the trajectory of humanity. Depends on how far back you go. People would say that the first event that led to everything that we see in our lives is the Big Bang. I think we have seen the digital Big Bang with the advent of the new AI. And what is going to happen beyond this point is an acceleration unlike anything we've seen in the past. If we are going to use the conventional, bureaucratic, slow government methods that we were able to establish over the last couple of centuries, and we think that we are going to go with those models and govern this technology, then we are mistaken. We need to move much faster. We need to have a sense of urgency, and we need to do it by also leveraging tools to be alongside us rather than against us.
We need to move faster. We need to have a sense of urgency. You heard it from the man with probably the coolest job in government anywhere in the world. Thank you for joining us, His Excellency Omar Sultan Al-Olama, and from IFC, the man deploying capital to bridge the gaps between poor and rich, Mohamed Gouled, and the man building part of the future of applied AI from Stability AI, Emad, Mostaque. Thank you all for sharing this sense of urgency.
Thank you.